Joyce, we are going to invite you for a journey together. A journey with Chico Xavier. Tonight we were invited to talk about a certain Chico who travels. For those probably in the discarnate plane or in the incarnate plane who have never heard of Chico Xavier, we'd like to give a brief introduction about him. Chico Xavier is considered the most renowned spiritist medium of all times, period. But of course he was born, it's good to know that he was born in Brazil. And he was born in the state of Minas Gerais, in a very small city named Pedro Leopoldo. And he was born on April 2nd, 1910, which means that this year we are celebrating his centennial. And of course the celebration is big, and that's why here we have this whole week and many more, and not only here at the center but many others around the world celebrating, paying tribute to him. It's good to note that recently we were in Brazil, and we were invited to join a committee with the president of the Brazilian Spiritist Federation and other directors to join them in representing the Spiritist movement in Brazil at the House of Representatives and also the Senate, where the politicians in Brazil, the ones that were Spiritists and the non-Spiritists, were paying special tribute to Chico Xavier. And if people don't know why, here we say why. Because he was more than a simple religious man who was fulfilling his duties as a religious man. He was a religious man in the sense of the word, which means that Chico Xavier was the true charitable heart, the true compassionate heart of the Brazilian people, showing us what is the true God consciousness, as Deepak Chopra often mentions to us, or as other people say, what the Christ consciousness really is. So, as a humanitarian, though he was poor, didn't have more than the 4th grade as a formal education, he didn't have many things to do in his life but to serve people for real. He had a very modest job, and when he retired, he worked even more to the benefit of everyone. And you may be asking how he worked to benefit other people. In many ways. He worked to give words of consolation and kindness to everybody who was visiting his centers, because he belonged to different centers at different times of his life, because he was moving from a city to another and then opening other centers and helping all the centers all together. Besides that, Chico Xavier was a very, almost like a complete medium, we would say. He had different mediumistic abilities. From healing mediumship, we got to know that he actually healed the medium Divaldo Franco, and it's recorded in a video conference, in a conference that was taped, and now it's on a DVD, in which Divaldo describes very clearly how through the mediumship, the healing mediumship of Chico Xavier, he got healed from a possible cancer, a throat cancer, and he's still living among ourselves, thanks to the willingness of help in the healing mediumship of Chico Xavier. He had other types of physical mediumship of physical effects, but the most important one was the intellectual mediumship, or the mediumship of intellectual effects, which was the psychography, or the automatic writing. Through him, more than 400 books came to life. They were published, and none of them he kept for himself. He donated, he gave up, he waived all the copyrights to other spiritist organizations, helping them to date with their dynamics and functioning. We are talking about someone that really represents what Christ came to tell us. And Chico Xavier, of course, he traveled. He traveled. Not as much as Divaldo Franco, because it's a different mission. But as all of us, he had to travel oftentimes to other cities, and he came to the United States. So Mackenzie asked us to highlight mostly the trip that he made, 2 trips that he made to the United States in 1965 and 1966. It's good to know that he was walking on these very lanes that now we live on. And he came here way before us, for the most part, and spread, the seeds of Spiritism. But you may be wondering why. There is actually a story that while he was traveling in the United States, and in this time he was in one of the series in Maryland, he brought to us a teaching about how we should behave when we travel. It's actually the first chapter of this book that is coming through in English very soon, sometime this year, published by the International Spiritist Council, which is entitled in Portuguese, Entre Irmãos de Outras Terras, maybe among siblings of our other lands, something like that. And he traveled to Maryland, specifically Silver Spring, and then North Carolina, and then Philadelphia, New York, Washington, D.C., and of course then he traveled to Paris in France and London in England as well. So he wasn't alone. He came along with the other friend who was a medium at a time working with him, named Valdo Vieira. And it's good to note that they didn't come alone. Spiritually speaking, there was a group of spirits that followed them and actually guided them towards all the steps, because they were not coming here just to a quick tour in the United States. They actually, in this book, at the introduction, we get to know the reasons why they came along. First of all, Emmanuel said it's time to go to the United States. Why, you may be asking, but why they came on the year 1965 and not any other time of the life that they were living in? Because the spirits planned the celebration of the foundation of the first Spiritist society in Brazil, the centennial of the first Spiritist society in Brazil, by making them travel here and continue dissemination in the United States. So here we open up for a first reflection. The beauty of collaboration and cooperation among different lands. So we are celebrating the centennial of the first Spiritist society in Brazil, and the higher minds are planning how to do that work and disseminate it in the neighboring lands, and specifically in the United States of America. If you have read already the book A Caminho da Luz by Emmanuel, or In the Path of Light, something like it when it comes to be published in English, Emmanuel actually shares with us that the Christ-like spirits, together with Jesus, when they planned on the implementation of the Christ teachings in America, they actually had a plan for that to happen in many countries. Brazil having a specific role and symbolically correlated to the role of the heart. And if you think about the role of the heart, it is sending nourishment elsewhere, because the heart pumps blood And inside your blood you have cells that actually the main function is to be carriers of oxygen, giving new life wherever they are, vitalizing things wherever they are. So we can tell that this is the main mission in some correlation that we can briefly mention here. It's probably much higher than we can imagine, but this is just as one of the main roles of the heart that we can, in an analogy, understand the symbolism. And to the United States, the role of the brain of the planet. As a neuroscientist, I love the brain. So I am inside the big brain of the planet, which is very interesting, because then the brain of the planet, what does that mean? And people think to control the whole world. No, it's beyond it. It's to coordinate everything. It's different from control. And between the heart and the brain, they need one another so much that one cannot live without the other. There is a command of our hearts here on the back of our neck, inside of the last part of our brains, or let's say the central nervous system, that if you lesion it, your heart stops beating. Whereas if your heart stops beating, there's no oxygen for the brain. So you're talking about the interdependence of two main organs of the body. Not saying that the other parts of our bodies are useless, because if you can't use your hand, it is painful. But we're saying that these are very vital and very important to a level that will make everything else depend upon them, but they are interdependent. So here we have the heart, everything beginning with the heart. The Spiritist movement spreading to Brazil. And when the centennial of the first Spiritist cell or center in Brazil is being celebrated, the Spirit mentors, through Emmanuel, Chico Xavier's mentor, plan ahead and say, you go there because we need to plant the seeds of the first Spiritist self there now. And that's what they came here to do. They came here as a first official wave of the true Spiritists that were coming to the American lands to disseminate Spiritism. And they found open doors. And you may be thinking, but who were the people waiting for them here? Did Chico Xavier, do you think Chico Xavier knew how to speak English? It's good to know that he actually did an immersion course. He actually came here, and day in, day out, for the time they were here, he was learning English in a systematic way. Why, Vanessa? Did he want to live here? He knew he couldn't stay here much longer, but he wanted to be a better instrument for the good spirits. For the second part of this book, the both mediums received the messages directly in English. So to be a good instrument for the spirits, they needed to have the English language a little bit, minimally, at their own hands to make it clear, the messages that they were bringing about. Not only that, but as André Luiz said through the mediums, in the first chapter, important points for the Spiritist who travels. Probably this is something, as we often said in other times that we met, something that we should have at all languages being spread out in all airports of the planet. Why? It would save a lot of time and trouble in many people's lives, because it begins by saying, when you travel, you should get to know more about the legal dispositions of the country that you're visiting and obey them. And then they start telling us point by point what we should do to live a better life during that either brief or longer time that we'll be spending in X country that we're visiting. Of course, this is specifically for spiritists. So something that spiritists should know before they travel. I didn't know before I traveled here, but then it truly changed my life. And certainly would change many people's lives. And Chico Xavier, together with Valdo Vieira, they met here people who were not Brazilians. They were even Hispanic of other countries in Latin America, or actually an Arabic family in North Carolina, the Haddads, who actually opened the doors of their home and were the instruments of the foundation of the first Spiritist center in the United States, in North Carolina, the Christian Spiritist Society. And then we get to know that when they were traveling around, who were with them? Very enlightening spirits, and enlightened spirits as well, such as André Luiz, Bezerra de Menezes, Brother X or Humberto de Campos. We had also the presence of spirits that were Americans. Probably you haven't heard before, but Ernest O'Brien, Kevin Van Dyne, Anderson, and others. And of course Emmanuel was with them as well. So this is another highlight for us. Did you know that when you travel, your mentor is with you? Because sometimes we forget. We go, and then when problems happen, where is my mentor? Is he still there in Brazil? Because you moved here. Or is he still there in Massachusetts somewhere on a hidden land, somewhere else? Then where is my mentor? When you travel, do you think about following instructions from your mentor? Or do you simply say, I'm traveling. If you want, you can come and follow me. You know why I'm saying this? It's because there was a time that Chico Xavier actually wanted to go from Minas Gerais, which is one of the states in Brazil, to São Paulo, actually to São Paulo City. And when he was at the bus station, Emmanuel said, okay, have a safe trip. I'll see you when you come back. And he said, what do you mean? You're not coming? I said, no, I'm not coming. How come? Because you're not supposed to go. Why not? There is a materialization. Well, there were many that he participated. And that wasn't the first time that he actually received this advice from Emmanuel. And this time, he said to Chico, you don't need to go there. But if you want to go, you go. I'll be here when you come back. But Emmanuel said, it's up to you. He was going to a center to participate in a materialization meeting. He wasn't going to a bar, a restaurant, a disco, or anything. The medium Ivone Pereira also reminds me of a passage, for those who don't know, was one of the most renowned women mediums in the Brazilian Spiritist movement. She actually had a similar experience. And that time around, she had the opportunity of having a direct advice coming from Dr. Bezerra de Menezes. She was invited as a great medium to lead a special mediumship course in her city. Hundreds of people were waiting for her. Dr. Bezerra came to her and said, Ivone, that's not the way we do it. You should not go. And she said, why not? Because I'm telling you, it's not the way it works. If you go, you'll suffer. Well, we're still learning. It's not that she didn't appreciate Dr. Bezerra de Menezes, but she started planning on going to the meeting anyways because she wanted the proof of what was supposed to happen if she actually went there. So she dressed up and was about to leave the home when she saw a shadow. She tripped and broke her leg. Oh, Vanessa, that's so disastrous. Why you're saying that? No, I'm afraid. I'm not going to leave home anymore. But this is we're mentioning here so we can actually learn before we travel to double check, like Divaldo Franco does. If you come to him and say, Divaldo, how about coming to the White House to talk to President Obama? He's inviting you. You think he'll simply say, yeah, I'm coming? No, he'll say, Joanna, can we go there? Because it's we. You and I, we have a relationship with our mentors. Are you double checking things with your mentor before you decide what you're going to do? Nobody taught us that, Vanessa. I know. But that's what we learned with Chico Xavier, with these great mediums. Before you do things, not that you become dependent, but you facilitate their work because they will be the ones having headaches, trying to save us from the troubles we put ourselves in, right? Why not make it easier for them and also for us in that cooperation? So Chico Xavier shows us in this trip, and that's why they published this book, to show us, and they published not out of purpose, it was purposeful, that they published the places where they received the messages from different spirits, the date, the day, the month, and the year. Why? You think this has a meaning? Of course it does. Because it's telling us that these spirits, they plan their lives to help us, and not only that day, but to keep helping us many generations ahead of us, like what's happening right now. And they also travel with us if we are obedient enough, if we are open enough. So what was happening was this, just so we can picture the way they used to plan their trips. Chico Xavier, when he planned his trip to the US, was under the command of Emmanuel due to the purposes that I just mentioned to you. And they said, Emmanuel said to him, we're going to travel, and while you be doing the meetings in the incarnate plane, we'll be doing our meetings in the discarnate plane and bringing the messages. So some of the chapters were psychographed by Chico Xavier, others by the medium Paulo Vieira. Doesn't matter to us. Although this is a phenomenon in itself, because it tells us that no matter the instrument, if they are willing and open enough, the same spirits can come through them and deliver the messages. So there is no ownership from us to the spirits. I am the only one who receives these messages, right? But when we are traveling, they accompany us like they accompany them. So they were meeting in the spirit realm and then coming here and telling through the mediums what they were discussing. And this is what one of the stories that they tell us that probably we should think about whenever we're traveling. And this is specifically for spiritists. This is a message that came through in August 1965 through Brother X. Brother X, who was Humberto de Campos, we have the poster right here on my right, explaining who he was and his picture. Brother X, or Humberto de Campos, was a great writer and poet in Brazil, very renowned. And then he became a spiritist and helped, and still does help, the movement. And he said that they were talking in the spirit realm, and he was talking to a guy that was in their team, probably you have never heard of him, named Samuel the Sereni. he was actually an old friend from the Jewish culture. The beauty of mingling people and putting together people, mingling with people and putting together people that actually are like-minded irrespective of their backgrounds. And he said, well, I was talking then to Samuel, and we were chatting here, when he said, well, by the way, in regard to the dissemination of the Spiritist doctrine, it reminds me of a true account that happened many centuries ago, when sometime while the first Christians were living in a city in Cappadocia or Galatia, that city suffered from great crisis, financial and also health-wise. The whole population was suffering. And then a group of Christians elsewhere in another land have heard about it. They heard about it and said, well, let's prepare the resources, remedies, food, clothes, and the ships. They had 6 ships. And they said, let's put it all together and travel. And like when we Spiritists plan our trips all together, what do we do first? We start singing hymns of praise. Oh, we're so happy. And then they were sailing towards the people who were in need, as happy as they were, because they were promoting and do the Christ teachings by doing charity. They were traveling and traveling and traveling, sailing, 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 when somebody in the very land that was receiving the ships forgot to turn on the what is the name of that again? I forgot it in English. Farol. The lighthouse, of course, the lighthouse, Vanessa. Yes, the lighthouse. And then they forgot to turn on the lighthouse. I did this on purpose just to see if you were. So then they forgot to turn on the lighthouse, and what happened to the ships? What do you think? They collapsed. They collided. Everything was gone. No way to help the people. Vanessa, again, a dramatic story. Well, this is Brother X saying, what can I say? And then the conclusion is, he says, this incident, my friends, illustrates the need for a criterious dissemination of Spiritism in all directions. It's not only about, yeah, let's go there and talk to people. Let's plan ahead. Undoubtedly, we all need the goodness that helps the body and heals the injuries. But we cannot forget, without grave problems, the needs of the spirit. So then, he says, as Allan Kardec told us once, without charity there is no salvation. And then Brother X says, I would then rephrase it saying, without light there is no path. So we are saying that when we are traveling in this life, because we're traveling. Oh, but my house is here, Vanessa. Your temporary house that you're paying mortgage. It's good to know that one day you won't need to keep paying anymore. Right? That's why we put 30 years, probably won't be there anymore. It's going to be taken by someone else. But then, it's good to know that we're traveling right now. Even though we may not be traveling within the city that we live in, or to other states, or to other countries, where we are living in this very life as someone who is traveling temporarily here. And the main question we ask ourselves is, are we enlightening our path enough so we can see where we are walking in? Are we using all the resources that we have at hand and inviting all these great spirits like Chico Xavier and Valdeveira did when they came to the United States and Europe. Being obedient enough to the voices of the beyond so we can fulfill the duties in this life and go back home with clear conscience. This is what they are telling us. What Joana de Angelis often mentions to us, and we have a CD by Joana de Angelis and Divaldo Franco that is named Inner Journey. This is actually the journey of all journeys. Everywhere we travel, there is a part of us that either stays there or comes with us. We leave fingerprints everywhere we go, materially speaking. There is no way for us to not leave a mark of whom we are, physically and psychologically and spiritually, where we are. The same will happen in this life. So the Chico who travels is actually the person who is aware of his immortality. And everywhere I go, I see myself as an immortal being. How immortal do you feel yourself? How immortal do you feel yourself? Do we feel ourselves right now beyond this existence? Sooner or later, this body is going to go away, being recycled on earth. But where is our mind going to be? And this is what this book comes to tell us. That whenever we think about this inner journey, we are saving our time from trouble in the future. The present and the future. And we are actually investing in the long run of life. As we said yesterday in the workers of the Last Hour Center, we need to make millennial plans. Chico Xavier, when he was traveling, he could recognize the people whom he met in previous lives. But then, Vanessa, you may say, I can't see it. But do you think it's out of context or without a purpose that we meet here and now? Or just because we like Spiritism? There is a purpose. And the purpose is to grow together. Are we making it easier or more complicated? Then, Chico Xavier taught us that whenever he traveled, he not only was obedient to the spirits who were following him, but he was also cooperative with the people whom he met. Like Divaldo Franco, if I may do a parenthesis, because he also learned this with Chico Xavier. Whenever Divaldo Franco travels, for example, he does the best he can to create less problems for his host. Do you want to know how? Because I host Divaldo Franco every time he goes to Baltimore. And it is amazing. And he said Chico Xavier used to do the same. He would come home, be as quiet as he can. He would be as sympathetic and kind as he could. And he can. He would have a meal, as he does, a meal, not eating excessively, not making any requests. He's an 82-year-old man. He doesn't make any special requests like Vanessa or whomever. I can't eat this or I should eat that. He makes you feel so comfortable. If you put something on the table and he can't, he's going to find a way around to accommodate the pleasantness of being there with you and make you not even feel that he can't eat something. And then, after chatting and being very pleasant, he would say, now I'm going to retreat to my room and stay there. But, oh, kids, stay here and talk. I'll leave you free to do what you have to do. No, but I am free to be here talking to you. No. Be free. I don't want to change your schedule. And this is not only with us, everyone who hosts Divaldo Franco, he treats the same way. He goes to his room with his laptop, answering emails for the people who are in need, psychographing, praying, whatever he needs to do. And then he comes back for the talk. Doesn't give any trouble to anybody. Chico Xavier was the same. And how often we travel, especially to our families, to visit them. And we demand, we complain, as if they have to this, they have to do that, just because we're visiting them. And we forget that the first thing when we're traveling, even if we're back in our countries, or to our cities, or to our families, is to respect the rhythm of people's lives. We can't change it, unless there is a special arrangement. So this is something else that they taught us during these trips. And to all of us who are spiritists, they say the worst thing is to compare where we live with where people live. Chico Xavier Valverde didn't do that. Because the first message by André Luiz says, we cannot complain and compare our land with someone else's land. We should always appreciate and be open, and they say, to learn the language to be more useful. And Chico Xavier did so. Remember, he was a 4th grader. He didn't have other degrees, any degree whatsoever. And when he came here, he made efforts to learn the language so he could be more useful. Then you mean, Vanessa, if I go to China, I must learn Chinese. At least to say ni hao. At least to say ni hao.
Yeah.
And if you go to Japan, at least to say arigato. Right? That's the least we can do. And if you go to France, at least to say merci. And if you go to a Spanish-speaking country, to say gracias, etc., etc., etc. Why not? This is the least. This is the least of what we say spiritual etiquette. We should implement courses such as this in the Spiritist Center. We would entitle it Spiritual Etiquette. We need actually the day-to-day life etiquette, because people really miss the boat in regard to day-to-day life etiquette. But spiritually speaking, we need to be polite. We need to know how not to disturb people with our vibrations. We needed to not only be worried about not disturbing, but being proactive in helping and serving. This is the true spiritual etiquette. So when I see this book, I would say this is a book that begins with the first lessons of spiritual etiquette for those who are traveling. Not traveling from a state to another, from a land to another, but traveling in this reincarnation. And you know, we've talked about this maybe in one center or another. When we immigrate, we are reincarnating within a reincarnation. Why? Because we're beginning a new identity. Really? But I want to be who I am. I was. But you won't. You won't be the same again. Never ever again. A river doesn't run the same way at the same point. Follows for some Marcel days long ago. And the same happens to us. So then, we should really focus ourselves in this spiritual etiquette so we could live a better life, have better relationships, and be collaborators of the ones whom we're meeting. So then we can go and visit the people whom we are visiting and live with that feeling of, I left something light and good. Not showing off anything. Sometimes being quiet, probably. We were talking about it earlier. Somebody very wisely said, sometimes be quiet is the remedy. And that's what the Master said earlier. The water of peace. And something that probably is very hard for me, because I like to talk. Yeah, I recognize it. I don't come here as master of any of this, but someone who is studying and trying to understand it. But really, it's the impression that we leave with our vibration. And for us as spiritists, this book is very invitational as well, because they tell us about the main trip in this life, which is this very reincarnation. It's the only one we are living in now. Many people are concerned about their previous lives. And Chico Xavier knew his relationship with Emmanuel in previous lives. He knew his relationship with many other spirits whom he got in touch through the work he was doing. When he was traveling here and there, he knew it wasn't by chance, and there was an explanation about the relationship he had with everybody whom he was meeting. But the focus was always in this life. To be mindful. He was very mindful. And when we say mindful, we are talking about putting the fullness of our minds in the present. Being centered. Being fully aware, getting the consciousness of the reality we're living in and focusing here and now. Because when we are anxious, we are living in the future that doesn't exist. When we are depressed, we are living in the past that is gone and we can't change. So the only way to live a life is to live in the present. And Chico Xavier, in his trips here, he was living in the present. If it were not so, he wouldn't have space and time to actually delight himself in the teachings that tell us about healing. For example, tell about in a trip they had in New York. They were at the Central Park, visiting around, and Brother X was with them. And then Brother X says, well, here I was, and I look around and I see Horace Greeley, who was a great spiritualist in America. And I started talking to him, and he describes the whole dialogue. Then another time when he was actually visiting another land in Maryland, he got to have a meeting with William James, the renowned Harvard professor who was there to tell us a whole lot about the dissemination of the Spiritist teachings. And there are many things. I would say we have a manual for the dissemination on our lands here in this very little book. And also about the main trip in this life. The main trip that in chapter 30 is entitled, again, why is Brother X so important? Because he's the reporter of the life, the afterlife. So maybe when you travel, there's a reporter as well that is observing and talking to everybody and can actually make arrangements for you and help you out. So when you're in trouble in the airport, maybe instead of being upset with things, you can remember, hey guys, you know better about this. How do I get out of this? Instead of simply feeling like, you know, in the lab I work at the University of Maryland, and there is a scenario that is very interesting. In some of the research we do human research as a scientist, and we do animal research with all the love of our hearts and ethics, etc. But one of the animals that we use to do some experiments to understand better about the dynamics of the brain, of course, is a rodent. Okay? And we love them because they are very cute and they are very adorable. So one day, a friend of mine, because they have a tail, and you know, rats can't see far. They can't see much. They have these reddish eyes. Actually, they're almost blind. The way they identify the world around is through what we call the whiskers. You know, their mustache. The whiskers. Here they have the sensors that connect to an area in the frontal cortex that is named the barrel cortex because it's the shape of a barrel, and sends information there, and then they interpret what's happening around. That's why they like to walk around the walls. Because if you put them in the center, they run away because they get lost. They can't see anything. So that's why they walk around, and that's why they prefer darkness. Because their eyes, because they're almost blind, they're very sensitive to light. So now we understand the little rats, why they like to come out when we are asleep. It's not because they know we are sleeping, but because there is no light. So there he was, in his cage, and a friend of mine grabbed the rat by the tail. Guess what happened to the rat? He got desperate. As if the world was going to end. Imagine somebody gets you by the tail and flips you upside down. You're going to feel like, oh my Lord, the world's going to end. Well, there was a cage here and another cage here. And grabbing the rat from the tail, the intention of the experimenter was just to transfer from one cage to the next. He couldn't see it. He couldn't understand it. He got into great despair. Isn't that what happens in our lives? Because we're still blind. We are blind. We don't understand why God sent us to the United States. Reincarnating here, or reincarnating there and sending us here, or sending to these lands, or meeting these people and not other people. And just like the rat, we get desperate. And what God only wants is to transfer us from a cage to another. Just the transition of life that we need for something that is very important for us. And I say this with the love in my heart for the animals that we use, and also for our own selves and the way God treats us. So, talking about this very reincarnation, we can't see. And the light still bothers us. When people come with too much light, we become quite upset. Because it's like, why don't you drink? You bother me. Why don't you smoke? You bother me. Why don't you want to gossip now? You think you're so elevated? Right? Why don't you want to make a plot so we can put these bad boys down? Why? It bothers us. And sometimes we're jealous and envious. So then, just like the little rat, we need to come out of our blindness. And this is why this book comes to us and changes the way in which the main parable of our lives is told by Jesus. James, in a way, transforms it to the spiritist sense, because we are spiritists. And in this inner journey of this reincarnation, we ask, what are we here for? And Chico Xavier, through his hands, Brother X, again, tells us, here we were in the spirit realm, talking among ourselves, and then another rabbi, another one, there were many Jewish people with them in this trip, which is very interesting. And they are good friends with the Arabic family that they met and founded the first spiritist cell in North Carolina. Something we don't pay much attention. The cooperation among different cultures that for some people apparently are so far apart, they'll never get along. And here, they're living at peace in both realms. Something we're learning in this very trip that they made in 65 and 66. The peace of all cultures. It's not by chance that they are describing these very people and these very names. The name of the rabbi, because he purposely gave us a name, was Zohar ben Ozias, and he was talking about the truth of the gospel in the spiritual realm, and he wanted to ask permission to paraphrase the parable of the talents that was told by Jesus. So the rabbi comes with great respect to Jesus' parable of the talents. And this is about our inner journey in this life. We have many talents, each one of us. And it's not on anybody else to tell us how best we can multiply our talents. It is on us to find our own way of being the ones multiplying our talents. So then, he said, well, my friends, this is how it begins. The Lord of the land left temporarily and called his 3 servants. And let's think which one of the 3 we are. Called, again, a trip, you see. He traveled. And then the servant stayed and said, well, come here, let me give you. To the first one, I'll give you money, power, comfort, ability, and prestige. To the second, gave intelligence and authority. And to the third, he gave what? If you have read it before, you know. What is it? He gave
Faith.
Faith. I want to know what you're thinking. Money, but the other guy got the money already. No. Okay, what do you think? Time. Give something you all have in your hands of the heart. The Spiritist teachings. Spiritism. He said, here it is. The Spiritist teachings. So to the first, the 5 different abilities. To the second, 2, and to the last one, Spiritism. Well, a long time passed by, and the 3 servants were a little bit hesitant. They were afraid, but then they came back to pay the Lord what he has given them. The first one came along and said like this, Lord, I'm sorry, but I actually made a lot of mistakes. I couldn't fulfill your will as a whole. But you know, let me tell you, with the 5 talents you gave me, I multiplied in 5 more, though the mistakes that I made. So I created work, progress, friendship, hope, and gratitude. So please forgive me, divine friend, if I couldn't do more. And the Lord very calmly said, well, faithful servant, you didn't make a mistake out of your own will. Go back to another reincarnation, okay? And begin again your interrupted work. And you're going to be reborn among those who love you. That's a merciful Father, a merciful Lord. So when we look at Donald Trump, instead of pointing the finger and saying, this guy in exile is going to be poor, we say, you know, probably he's going to go back and be given everything again. And the Lord's going to say, begin again with his loved ones. Not necessarily people who are rich will come back as poor people. Because of the rule. The law is of love, not only of justice. The law of God is also of charity, not only of justice. And the math of God is beyond our comprehension. And then the second one, who had authority and intelligence, came along and look at the attitude, which was beautiful. Again, he came, Lord, forgive me for my incapacity. I couldn't understand clearly your design to distribute equal happiness among all creatures, and I made huge mistakes. But even though I mobilized 2 values, the ones that you gave me, and created 2 more, with intelligence and authority, I created culture and experience for many of my brothers who were living there. And the Lord was very satisfied Can you believe he was very satisfied? He was, despite the mistakes. When we look at people, this guy is so arrogant just because he has a degree. Well, maybe he's creating something good for people. So we shouldn't just, label the person because of one mistake. There's something that the person is creating that is helping other people. And then the Lord said, well, faithful servant, you didn't make a mistake out of your own will. Go back to another reincarnation. Begin again your interrupted work among those who love you. Oh, merciful Father. And here we come, the very proud Spiritists who come and say, and this is what Brother X says. Well, he came quickly and said, Lord, here I give you back the Spiritist knowledge, untouched and pure, as I received from you. The Spiritist teaching is light, sir, and with it, I learned your law is too hard. How many of you say, it's so hard to be Spiritist? And I know it will be given according to what we give. I tried to disseminate it, but how could I ever disseminate this light without hurting people or bothering people? So then, I was afraid of your law. I then decided to be with the Spiritist teachings for me in my own house. And then, not to bother people, because people thought I was crazy. Oh my Lord, Brother X says that the rabbi described that the sublime Creator was very angry and said, can you believe it? And he actually said that the treasure of the Spiritist knowledge would be taken away immediately and be given to the other two diligent collaborators that were walking on the earth, and said, unfaithful servant, there is no alternative for your negligence but to start all over again in the most obscure pathways of the beginning. Wow. Oh, you see, even the book is scared about it. My goodness. And he said, Lord, Lord, but, and this is very interesting how he wraps up his paraphrase of the parable. Because he says, the servant was crying. And he said, but Lord, where is your equity? You gave to my friends money. How many of us are like this? But he has money. I don't. Power. I don't. Comfort. Ability. Prestige. Intelligence. Authority. And to me, you only gave the Spiritist teaching? Imagine if Chico Xavier had said so. Because basically he had the Spiritist knowledge. He multiplied it. He was the reverse of this parable. And then, how can you possibly, dear Lord, look at our rebelliousness here, allow this heavy weight of your severity to fall upon my shoulders? And the Lord, then he became calm. Because, the wiser always, when the other one goes down. And he said, well, you don't recognize the light of the truth that I gave to you so you could help others. If both of your friends couldn't fulfill everything they had, it's because they lacked the discernment that you could have taught them. Let's call Paris Hilton then and help her. Maybe we need to do that. Because we judge people and we think, maybe I am not the one cooperating with that person. Even though people are there in Hollywood who said probably we're not the ones helping them out with our prayers. Because if we pray for them, instead of simply judge them, we could actually do much better. The power of prayer. So then by hiding your treasure that I lent you, not only you missed the point by your fear of helping others, but you also harmed the work of your brothers. So keeping spiritus for ourselves, going home and doing nothing much is not only not to do something, but is actually to harm other people. And then in this way, you think he stopped? No, he was still complaining. He said, Lord, Lord, but why? Why you're so rough with me? Why is, if your law is of mercy and justice? And then the assistants of the Lord conducted the unfaithful servants to the shadows of the new beginning. And then with that in mind, he wraps up by saying that what we have at hand with Spiritism is the talents of all talents, which is the talent of discernment. Without discernment, we cannot fulfill our duties in this journey, in this reincarnation. So the best thing we can have is the compass, the working compass of Spiritism, pointing us the north. And the north that is being pointed to us comes if we are not blind and are aware enough to discern how to find this north and follow the path, illuminating the path so we can walk through this journey safe and sound, helping ourselves while helping others. May God bless all of us. Thank you.